He was just walking home in a hoodie until a police drone tagged him as a threat. 5 minutes later, his face was on the news, but not his side of the story. A white tech executive swears it was just an algorithm. But when the footage leaks from inside the precinct, the truth is far worse than a glitch. And what they find in the deleted files could burn the whole system down. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. It began like any other crisp autumn morning on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, where privileged dressed in plaid skirts and tailored blazers, students spilled into the halls of Langston Preparatory Academy, a private school known more for its legacy admissions than its moral compass. The air buzzed with entitlement, the scent of fresh espresso, and the faint musk of inherited arrogance. In classroom 3C, sunlight spilled across coarse oak desks as Miss Eloise Gentry began her World Perspectives lecture, her tailored gray suit sharp enough to match her tone. Her salt and pepper bob fell just above her chin, perfectly stiff, like her smile. Her reputation preceded her, elite, articulate, polished, and quietly intolerant. "Now," she said, strolling between rows of students, "let's discuss the architecture of success. Who we become is often shaped by the environment we're born into. Wouldn't you agree?" Students nodded in curated unison, their hands absent-mindedly scrolling on school-issued tablets. Near the back of the room, Marlon Booker, 14, quiet, whip-smart, sat upright, notebook open, pen poised. He rarely spoke, unless called upon. The only black student in the class, he wore his uniform perfectly, though his shoes were slightly worn at the edges, a silent reminder of the distance between him and the trust fund kids around him. Miss Gentry paused in front of him. Her eyes twinkled with something performative. "Marlon," she said almost sing-song, "what does your father do?" The room stilled. Marlon blinked. He hated this question. Always had. "He's a transit worker," he replied slowly. Miss Gentry cocked her head, her voice slicing the air like glass. "Oh, a city bus driver, right?" "A beat. He drives a road through the Bronx, doesn't he?" The room broke into light. Chuckles, not cruel at first, but theatrical, curated. Rich kids knew when to laugh, to maintain their social dominance. It wasn't the words, it was the weight behind them, the implication, the dismissiveness, the surgical condescension. Marlon froze, his lips parted slightly, his throat tightened, his pen trembled in his hand. "That's noble," Miss Gentry continued, her smile tightening. "I suppose it takes all types to keep the world moving." More laughter now, less restrained. Someone whispered, "Boss pass," and the nickname caught like wildfire in a dry field. Marlon lowered his eyes, the notebook before him blurring. His skin felt hot, like it was peeling from the inside out. His ears rang, his stomach knotted. His father, Jerome Booker, had never missed a day of work in 12 years. Rain, snow, riots, pandemics. He showed up. He held the wheel not just of a bus, but of their lives. Flashbacks flickered. His father's big, calloused hands, gripping the steering wheel with pride, the way he'd kiss Marlon's forehead at 5 a.m. before heading to work, the way he'd say, "It ain't what you wear, son, it's how you show up." And here, in this polished box of whiteness and money, that pride was being ground into the carpet beneath designer loafers. Miss Gentry, satisfied with the response, pivoted and resumed her lecture as if nothing had happened. The weight of her words trailed behind like smoke, suffocating only one student in the room. The rest of the class coasted through the hour. Marlon sat, motionless, trying to disappear into the wood grain of his desk. When the bell rang, he didn't move until the room emptied. Even then, he gathered his things slowly, deliberately, as if speed would somehow crack the fragile shell he was building around himself. Outside in the hallway, laughter lingered. "Yo, bus pass, wait up," someone called. Marlon didn't turn around. At home that evening, dinner set steaming on the table. Baked chicken, greens, cornbread. Jerome whistled softly, wiping his grease-streaked hands on a towel. He'd worked a split shift and rushed home to eat with his son. Dinner together was sacred. But Marlon pushed food around his plate. Jerome watched. "You sick?" "No." "You get into it with someone at school?" "No." Jerome's brow furrowed. "You sure? You've been picking at that cornbread like it insulted your mama." Marlon hesitated, looked up, thought better of it. "I'm just tired." Jerome nodded slowly, but didn't press. He knew that look. He'd worn it at 14 himself, when a guidance counselor told him college might be too ambitious. When he'd been followed through stores. When the world tried to tell him who he wasn't. Later that night, Marlon sat on his bed, headphones in, but no music playing. His thoughts looped. City bus driver, right? Takes all types. Books, bus pass. He opened his school portal, saw the teacher's note on the class page. Thanks for a thoughtful discussion today on privilege and meritocracy. He wanted to throw his laptop across the room. He didn't. Instead, he typed into Google, how to file a racial bias complaint against a teacher. He didn't submit it. The next morning, Jerome Booker woke before dawn, as always, but this time, he didn't put on his MTA uniform. He didn't pack his lunch. He stood at the mirror, tying the same tie he wore to church on Easter Sunday, smoothing it over a shirt he hadn't worn in 2 years. In the reflection, he saw his son's school badge peeking out of Marlon's blazer, hanging over the chair. He picked it up. The silence of the house was thick with intent. Outside, a city bus rumbled down the street, but this morning Jerome wasn't on it. Jerome walks into the school, the next morning, eyes dark with resolve. The sun filtered gently through floor-to-ceiling windows in the Winslow estate, casting golden streaks on white marble floors and crystal vases filled with orchids. It was the kind of silence that screamed wealth, too quiet, too sterile, too still. Savannah Fields moved carefully through that silence every day like a seasoned dancer who knew which floorboards to avoid and which eyes were always watching, even when no one was in the room. She had worked for the Winslow family for 8 years. She knew every creak, every smell, every schedule in that house. But things had changed since the baby came. Lucas Winslow had arrived into the world with everything money could buy. Organic formula, handcrafted Italian crib, a nursery designed by a celebrity baby consultant. But he didn't have what mattered most. Not anymore. His mother, Annabelle Winslow, had spiraled into postpartum depression within weeks of his birth, and had disappeared without warning 3 months ago. Rumors swirled about rehab, a European clinic, maybe even abandonment. But nothing was confirmed. The Winslow PR team made sure of that. What was certain, though, was that baby Lucas had been inconsolable since. No pacifier worked, no white noise app, no lavender balm, no designer rocking chair. Only Savannah. Savannah, with her steady hands, warm chest, and deep hums that reminded the boy of something primal, something safe. She had raised other people's children her whole life. As a teenager, she helped raise her siblings in Alabama. Later, she nannied for rich families in New Jersey and Manhattan. But she'd never felt a bond like this one. Maybe it was because Lucas had no mother, or maybe it was because Savannah had just become a grandmother herself, and holding Lucas was like folding time between generations. Still, boundaries were important. She knew that. That house, with its cameras and chandeliers, had its rules. She followed every one, until that morning. Lucas had been wailing for 45 minutes. His face was red, lips trembling, fists balled tight. His formula had been rejected, flung across the nursery with surprising strength for a 6-month-old. Savannah had rock-sung, rubbed his back, whispered every gospel lullaby she knew. Nothing worked. Then came the instinct. Unspoken. An old one she didn't even think about. She sat in the rocker, undid the top of her blouse, and gently brought Lucas to her breast. It wasn't premeditated. It wasn't rebellion. It was survival, for both of them. Lucas latched immediately. His cries softened to a fragile murmur, then vanished altogether. His tiny body relaxed, eyes fluttering shut, one hand curled near Savannah's heart. She rocked slowly. Her breathing steadied. She whispered his name like a prayer. Then the nursery door opened. The sound of Italian leather soles on hardwood was unmistakable, and then the pause. Carter Winslow stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light. His tailored navy suit looked like it had been steamed seconds before he put it on. His tie was still tight, briefcase in hand. His expression, though, was unreadable, cold, blank. Savannah's heart dropped into her stomach. She froze. Lucas still latched, her blouse slightly open, the air between them thick with shock. "Aye, Mr. Winslow," she began, voice barely above a whisper. But he said nothing. His gaze flicked from her face to Lucas, then back again. His jaw clenched once, then he turned and walked away. No slam, no shouting, just a vacuum of noise. That night, Savannah lay awake in the guest quarters, above the garage. The silence was worse than a confrontation. If he had yelled, she could have explained. If he had fired her, at least she'd have closure. Instead, there was nothing. No calls, no reprimands, no message. She paced the small kitchen, hands trembling. Every window in her body felt cracked open to shame, to panic. Did he think she'd harmed the baby? Did he see her as some stereotype now? A black woman violating some unspoken code of class or body? She looked in the mirror, and didn't see a woman trying to help. She saw what they might see, a maid crossing a line, a body used in a way the world never quite forgave. At 2:18 a.m. she heard the sound of Carter's office door shutting downstairs, then the murmur of a phone call. She pressed her ear to the vent. Yes, private, discreet. Carter's voice came through, muffled. I want a full background. Every employer, every connection. No, don't tell her, not yet. Savannah staggered backward. He had hired a private investigator. The next morning came too fast. Her alarm buzzed at 6:07 a.m., but she'd been up since 4:30, pacing, praying. She dressed slowly, hands shaking as she buttoned her blouse higher than usual. She pinned her hair tighter. Her palms were sweaty as she reached for her access badge. It beeped red. She swiped again, red. Another swipe, still red. Savannah looked up at the camera above the gate. It blinked. She stepped back. Her breath quickened. For the first time in 8 years, the door wouldn't open. A security guard she didn't recognize walked up holding a tablet. He glanced at her, then back to the screen. You Savannah Fields? He asked. She nodded. You've been removed from the active roster. Her mouth opened. No words came out.
The man softened a little.
Says here to call the main line if you have questions. Savannah stepped back, blinking against the morning sun. The gate stayed closed, and suddenly, the house behind it didn't feel like a home. It felt like a fortress, one she'd just been locked out of. The next morning, Savannah arrived to find her access card deactivated. The walls of Langston Preparatory Academy had never felt more silent or more suffocating. Whispers now trailed Marlon Booker like shadows. His every step through the marble-tiled halls echoed louder than footsteps should. He didn't just walk anymore. He carried something invisible but heavy, the weight of other people's projections. The mockery from Miss Gentry's class still hovered in the air like smoke. Days later, the word bus pass followed him through doorways and lunch tables, whispered in sync with laughs that stopped just before he turned his head. And still, Marlon didn't speak of it. He buried it deep, beneath his quiet posture and tighter jaw. But Jerome Booker, he didn't bury a damn thing. The morning after the incident, Jerome stormed into Langston's administrative building, wearing that same Sunday tie. He was a storm in dress shoes, firm voice, square shoulders, and a kind of rage that didn't yell, it spoke, calm and cutting. I'd like to speak with whoever thinks driving a city bus is beneath this institution, Jerome said, locking eyes with a white receptionist, who fumbled with her phone. A woman in a red power blazer, Missy Gillian Stokes, director of public image, soon appeared, smiling tightly. Mr. Booker, she began, we understand there was some classroom misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. Jerome's voice was low. A teacher humiliated my son for my job in front of the class, and now he's being called slurs, dressed up as nicknames. Miss Stokes offered a sigh. We've spoken to Miss Gentry, and she regrets the phrasing. But Mr. Booker Langston believes in open dialogue. We encourage students to navigate discomfort. Jerome leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. Let me be clear. My son's pain is not your school's teaching tool. But the meeting ended like so many others. Black parents endure at elite institutions. Polite tones, passive resistance, and a forced smile that said, we heard you. We're not changing a thing. A week later, the school announced its annual participation in the National Scholars Competition, a prestigious academic event featuring top high school students from across the country. Each school would nominate 3 students to compete in oratory, analysis, and problem-solving events. Langston had already chosen their top picks: Julian Crane, Emma Voss, and Hudson Reed, all white, all legacy. But when one nominee dropped due to a skiing injury, the open slot was supposedly available to the next best GPA. That was Marlon. The news dropped like a match in gasoline. Affirmative action kicking in early. Someone muttered outside the chemistry lab. I guess being poor is a superpower now, another whispered in gym. Miss Gentry said nothing, at least, not out loud. But that Friday, when the school's weekly newsletter went out, listing Langston's representatives for the competition, Marlon's name was missing. Marlon didn't confront her. He didn't ask questions. He didn't go crying to admin. Instead, he went to the library every day after school for hours. He read speeches by James Baldwin. He watched MLK's cadence. He practiced logical reasoning, memorized argument patterns. While Julian was offered fencing lessons and Hudson posted reels of his Range Rover, Marlon stayed behind. He sat in the back corner of the library, alone, or so he thought. Mr. Ben, the school's night janitor, had noticed. Ben was nearing 70. He moved slow but watched fast, and unlike most faculty, he saw Marlon, not just his skin or silence. He'd seen black students come and go at Langston, but this one stayed late for more than just survival. "You know what you're doing?" Ben asked, one evening, slowly wheeling his mop across the floor. Marlon looked up, startled.
Sir.
"You study ends to be invisible, or to make them see you." Marlon gave a tired smile. "I'm studying for the National Scholars Competition." Ben set the mop aside. "Used to be a debate coach at PS 99 back in the Bronx. That's before they closed us down for underperformance." "You want help?" Marlon paused, then nodded. That night began a quiet alliance. Each evening, Ben offered critique, not just on tone and structure, but on presence. "Speak like your ancestors are watching." He'd say, "Speak like you're the answer to somebody's prayer." By the day of the competition, Marlon's nerves were tightly wound, but his delivery razor sharp. The auditorium was packed. Hundreds of students from private schools across the Northeast buzzed through the lobby. Marlon stood backstage, feeling the weight of eyes that hadn't even seen him yet, but expected him to fail. When he took the stage, the murmurs died. He adjusted the mic, his voice steady. "My name is Marlon Booker. My father drives a bus, and I stand on the engine of his work." The judges sat up straighter. He spoke for 6 minutes, not a second wasted. He quoted Toni Morrison, then tied in the economics of educational disparity. He challenged class mythologies, but not with anger, with clarity, precision, with the calm power of someone who knew who he was. Silence filled the room when he finished. Then, a light clap, scattered, uncertain. His competitors' parents looked confused, some uncomfortable. The applause never grew thunderous, but Marlon didn't care. He walked off stage, knowing he had nailed it, and waited in the wings, eyes glassy. "You made him see you." The judges huddled for deliberation. Then came the results. Hudson won second, Julian took third, and the winner? Marlon Booker. His name rang through the hall, like a crack in glass. Some clapped, some stood, politely, but there were no whoops, no confetti, just a hollow kind of applause. Civilized, grudging. Nyland smiled, anyway, until the next morning. It started with an email from the competition board. Subject, urgent possible plagiarism, allegation. Jerome opened the message on his phone before Marlon saw it. He froze. "Marlon," he said, "you need to read this." Marlon skimmed the email, pulse spiking. A judge had raised concern that parts of his speech were strikingly similar to a piece published in The Atlantic 2 years prior. A complaint was filed by an anonymous Langston faculty member. Attached was a side-by-side comparison. One paragraph showed marginal similarity, not enough to accuse anyone seriously. But the accusation had been made, publicly, and now an investigation was pending. Marlon sat on the edge of his bed, stunned. "I didn't copy anything. I didn't even read that article." Jerome didn't doubt him for a second. "I know you didn't," he said, "but someone wants to make sure nobody else believes it." Marlon blinked slowly, then whispered, "Ms. Gentry, a scandal breaks out. Marlon's entry is accused of plagiarism." The gate buzzed open on Monday morning like nothing had happened. No apology, no explanation, no conversation, just silence. Savannah Field stepped back onto the Winslow estate with the same ID badge that had blinked red the day before, now suddenly green. Her shoes clicked over the stone walkway, her spine rigid as if bracing for invisible punches. Inside, the house was unchanged, pristine, decorated like a showroom, more than a home. And yet, something had shifted, something she could feel but couldn't name. Carter Winslow was waiting in the foyer. "Good morning," he said, without looking up from his phone. Savannah's throat tightened. "Sir." He raised one hand, stopping her. "The situation's been resolved. There's no need to discuss it further." Her mouth stayed open for a moment, stunned into silence. "Lucas is upstairs," he added flatly, and turned away. But something wasn't resolved. Not for Savannah. That night, she found her dinner plate alone on the staff kitchen table, cold, untouched. Usually, Mrs. Caldwell, the cook, left her something warm, even if Savannah ate late. But now, nothing but silence and clattering pans behind cold eyes. The next morning, the laundress avoided eye contact. The housekeeper who used to swap Sunday recipes now passed without a word. It spread fast, not just inside the house, but outside too. She overheard it at the grocery store. Whispers, glances, Side conversations that went quiet when she approached. The headlines hadn't gone public, but in these circles, wealthy, gossipy, and insulated news didn't need papers to travel. She nursed the baby. That's overstepping. Do you think he asked her to? She's angling for something. She thinks she's the baby's mama. That last one hit hardest. It came from a woman in a pastel cardigan at the Roseview Country Club, standing less than 4 feet from Savannah. She said it loud enough for a laugh. Deliberate. Savannah didn't respond. She couldn't. She just kept pushing Lucas's stroller forward. Her jaw clenched so tight it ached. That night, Savannah stood in the nursery holding Lucas, whose eyes crinkled the moment he saw her. He giggled, reaching for her cheek with chubby fingers. That little face, so free of judgment, was the only peace she found anymore. She kissed his forehead, whispered, "You don't know what they say about us, baby boy, and God willing you never will." Behind her, the nursery door creaked open. It was Carter. He didn't enter, just watched. Something unreadable flickered in his eyes. "Do you want me to put him down?" she asked gently, rocking Lucas. Carter shook his head. "No, he sleeps better with you anyway." The way he said it made Savannah pause. She felt it then. Not just the respect in his voice, but something else. Admiration, affection, or worse, possession. Over the next few days, the lines began to blur, not explicitly, not in a way she could report or name, but she felt it. Carter started appearing in rooms he usually avoided: the nursery, the kitchen. He watched her not with scrutiny but with fascination. He complimented her more. "You have a calming presence. He responds to you like no one else. You're irreplaceable." She smiled, politely, but unease bloomed beneath every syllable. Then there were the subtle gestures. He ordered her a new phone, saying it was easier for scheduling. He had a package sent to her quarters. Inside was a silk scarf, with her initials embroidered. He casually mentioned how lonely the estate had felt since his wife left. Savannah started locking her door at night, just in case. One morning, Savannah was refolding Lucas's clothes in the nursery when she noticed the security camera blinking in the corner. Nothing unusual. Cameras were everywhere. But this time, it blinked twice. Recording. That camera had never moved before. Now it tracked her. She turned toward it slowly. It froze, stopped moving. Her skin prickled.
The next day, the camera was gone entirely.
She said nothing. She just worked quieter, smiled less, watched more. Then came the dinner request. Carter approached her in the hallway, Lucas sleeping in her arms, and said it like a casual favor. "I'd like to invite you to dinner. Not here, just the two of us." Savannah stiffened. "Dinner, sir?" His voice was calm, but there was weight behind it. "Yes, you deserve an evening off the clock." "Off the clock?" she repeated, unsure if it was a gift or a test. Carter offered a soft smile. "You're more than an employee, Savannah." She didn't answer. She couldn't. 'Cause suddenly, everything was louder. The whispers at the country club, the silence in the staff quarters, the sudden gifts, the camera, the blurred lines. One evening, Carter asked Savannah to dinner, alone, not as employer and employee. It started in silence, just like the insult had. A blurry cell phone video, 36 seconds long, uploaded anonymously to a student-run Instagram page. There was no fancy caption, just a title. "A late teacher calls black kid bus token." The audio wasn't perfect, but the moment was unmistakable. Classe Louise Gentry, standing in front of her classroom, gesturing toward a seated Marlon Booker, her words clear enough to chill. "Let's be honest, success looks different for some of us. Not everyone's father drives innovation. Some just drive." Pause. "But I suppose buses need passengers too." The laughter that followed, snickering, smug, unfiltered, was the nail in the coffin. The video hit 200 views in 2 hours. By midnight, it hit 20,000. By sunrise, it was on TikTok, Twitter, and a dozen message boards, under hashtags like Bus Token and Gentrygate. The next morning, Langston Preparatory Academy was under siege, not from fire or force but from reputation. Students arrived to find camera crews outside the main gate, protesters lined the sidewalk, parents, alumni, activists holding signs that read, "Merit, not mockery. A bus pass built your city. Black kids deserve better." Marlon saw it from the back seat of a borrowed lift. His usual route, the school bus, was suddenly too public. He stared out the window, numb. In just one night, everything had shifted. Not inside the school, but outside, and it felt surreal. Inside, the students were split. Some whispered support, others stared like he was a trending scandal. Whispers echoed. He's the one from the video. Did he leak it himself? Imagine crying over a joke. At home, Jerome Booker sat hunched at the kitchen table, his phone screen glowing in the early morning light. He hadn't slept. He'd watched the video 15 times. Each time, it hit harder. Not just the words, but the pause before the laughter. The comfort Miss Gentry had, speaking like that in public. The belief that no one would ever challenge her. He picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts. Then he stopped. Instead, he opened his email. The subject line was blunt. To the Langston board, immediate action required.
His message was controlled, concise, lethal.
This is not about curriculum. This is about character. If your school believes in molding future leaders, then start by removing the ones teaching them how to belittle working families. He hit send, then stared at the screen. Minutes later, his inbox lit up with a new message. We are aware. We are reviewing the situation. Please remain professional in your public statements. Translation: don't make us look bad. By noon, Langston issued an official statement on their website. We deeply regret the incident that has caused distress to our students and community. Miss Gentry has been placed on administrative leave pending further investigation. No name, no apology. Just corporate damage control dressed in private school language. But the internet didn't wait. News anchors dissected every frame of the video. Local reporters camped outside the school gates, hoping to catch a shot of Marlon, who now walked with his hoodie up and head down. By evening, Miss Gentry released her own video. A dimly lit, stiff apology filmed from her office. She stared directly at the camera, her words carefully chosen. I regret the way my comments were interpreted. I never intended to cause harm or offense. I believe in the potential of all my students regardless of background. No mention of Marlon, no ownership, just enough detachment to protect her job. Marlon watched the apology on his phone from his bedroom. He didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just sat there, feeling like the target, and the proof all at once. The apology wasn't meant for him. It was meant for the board, for the media, for the donors. He glanced at the comment section. Thousands of replies. She didn't apologize to the kid. You can't misinterpret what she clearly said. This is why private schools are breeding grounds for racism. But there were other comments too. People are too sensitive. It was clearly a joke. If he can't take a little teasing, how will he survive the real world? Those stung more than Miss Gentry's words. Because they echoed something deeper. The belief that Marlon's pain was optional. That he was lucky just to be in that room. Jerome returned home late from work that evening, exhaustion in his bones. He found Marlon sitting on the floor, books open but unread. I didn't leak it, Marlon said quietly. Someone else recorded it. Jerome sat beside him. I know. I thought if I just worked hard, it'd be enough. That people would see me not where I came from. Jerome looked at his son, voice steady. Some people see skin before they see soul. That's on them, not you. Marlon didn't speak, but his silence held volumes. At 2:03 a.m., Jerome's phone buzzed. Unknown sender. No subject. Just one sentence. She's coming back next semester. Attached was a screenshot of an internal school memo, labeled confidential. Pending review and community response. Miss Gentry will resume limited teaching responsibilities starting spring term. Jerome stared at the screen, heart pounding. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Jerome receives an anonymous email. She's coming back next semester. Savannah stood in front of her bedroom mirror, the soft cotton of her best blouse clinging to her arms like a question she wasn't sure she wanted answered. Dinner. With Carter Winslow. Not a staff meeting, not a company event, no baby in tow, just her and the man, whose house she cleaned, whose son she rocked to sleep, whose mood shaped the entire rhythm of her day. She didn't know what to wear, but deeper than that, she didn't know who to be. The Uber pulled up to the curb of her modest apartment complex just before 7 p.m. The driver didn't ask her name. He already knew it. When the car stopped outside Lila Doval, a dimly lit, velvet-lined restaurant tucked into the corner of Tribeca, Savannah's breath caught in her chest. A valet opened her door before she could reach the handle. Inside, the scent of aged wine, cedarwood and wealth settled on her skin like perfume. Crystal chandeliers hung low enough to reflect in the water glasses. Waiters in black suits moved with the grace of dancers. And at the corner table, Carter Winslow rose to greet her. He wore a dark navy suit, no tie, his collar open, his sleeves perfectly cuffed. He smiled, not too wide, not too eager, like a man used to getting yeses without needing to ask. "You look radiant," he said. Savannah forced a smile, lowering herself into the chair opposite him. Dinner unfolded like a scene from a movie she didn't belong in. Wine she couldn't pronounce, food served on plates with names instead of numbers. Carter talked a lot. He told her about his father, distant, transactional, a man who'd built an empire but never knew how to hold a child. About his mother, who lived in Italy now, chasing a youth she'd already buried. About how lonely the house had become after Annabelle left. Savannah listened carefully, nodding at the right moments, offering a soft, "I'm sorry" when he paused. But her ears were sharp. Every story, every anecdote, ended with him looking across the table and saying something like, "But then you showed up. You filled a space I didn't know was empty. Lucas smiles when you enter the room. He doesn't even do that for me." His words were velvet, but underneath there was steel. Ownership. Each compliment felt less like a thank you and more like a claim. "But do you know how rare it is," he said, setting down his wine glass, "to find someone with your warmth, your instinct?" Savannah's spine tightened. "I try to do right by him," she said simply.
It's more than that, Carter replied. You don't just care for Lucas. You've become essential, and I don't mean that professionally.
Her heart skipped. She folded her napkin slowly, placing it in her lap to keep her hands from trembling. "I'm just doing my job, Mr. Winslow." He chuckled, slow and smooth. "Come on. After tonight, call me Carter." Savannah sipped her water instead of answering. The food arrived. Seared scallops and truffle risotto. But her appetite had vanished. Every bite tasted like an implication. After dessert, he walked her out to the car himself. She moved to shake his hand. He pulled her into a hug. Just a second too long. His breath hovered near her temple. "I hope this is the beginning of something more," he murmured. She stepped back, smiled faintly. "Good night, Carter." The ride home was silent, except for the sound of her heartbeat in her ears. She entered her apartment with sore cheeks from forced smiles and a stomach that churned with something sourer than wine. She dropped her bag on the counter and turned on the light. Sitting on her kitchen table was a bouquet of white orchids and red color lilies. No note, no signature, just a card that read, "You deserve beauty." Her breath caught. She didn't tell anyone about the restaurant. How did the flowers get there? The next morning, her niece Kenya stopped by unannounced. Kenya was sharp, blunt, and fiercely protective. She glanced at the flowers, then back at Savannah with narrowed eyes. "You're glowing, and you look tired. So, who is he?" Savannah hesitated, then told her everything. Kenya's face didn't change, but her voice did. "White men like that," she said slowly, "don't love us. They collect us, like art, like stories they tell at parties, like proof they're not racist." Savannah looked away. "I didn't ask for any of this." Kenya stood, fierce as ever. "Just don't let him rewrite your story while you're still living it." That night, Savannah sat on her bed scrolling through her texts, thinking, processing, wondering if she was being paranoid or not paranoid enough. As she reached for her charger, her phone buzzed, a strange flicker across the screen. She blinked. Then it happened again. A pop-up. Diagnostic log uploaded. Sync complete. She'd never seen that message before. Her heart began to pound. She opened her settings, scrolled fast, hands shaking. And there it was, a third-party app, installed 4 days ago, labeled discreetly as maintenance monitor. It had microphone access and location tracking. Savannah's hand dropped. She had never downloaded this. Her stomach dropped further when she checked the permissions installed remotely. Only one question burned in her mind. Who planted it, and why? Savannah finds her phone bugged and doesn't know who did it. The morning of the walkout, the school grounds felt different. The usual buzz of laughter and idle gossip was replaced by tension so thick it seemed to hover in the air, pressing against every window, every locker, every breath. Marlon stood at the edge of the school courtyard, hoodie up, fists buried in his jacket pockets. He wasn't trying to look brave, he was trying to hold himself together. Behind him, students gathered, quiet at first, but growing in number. What had started as a small group chat among juniors had turned into a full-fledged student protest. By 10 a.m., nearly 200 students stood shoulder to shoulder outside Langston's pristine glass doors, carrying cardboard signs and cell phones. Justice for Marlon. We are not bus tokens. Privilege isn't pedigree. The messages weren't perfect, but the outrage was real. Inside the school, blinds closed one by one. Teachers peeked from the windows, unsure whether to intervene or hide. Then the front gates opened, and Jerome Booker walked in. He wasn't in uniform. He wasn't holding a placard. He walked tall, dressed in a simple button-down shirt and slacks, carrying nothing but a megaphone in one hand and a calm fire in his eyes. He wasn't a man yelling. He was a man arriving. Jerome handed the megaphone to Marlon, without saying a word. Marlon took it, his hand trembling slightly. He'd never addressed a crowd before. He'd barely spoken in class. But now, all eyes were on him, not as a victim, but as a voice. He exhaled, then spoke. I didn't want this, he began, his voice steady. I didn't want to become the black kid who got locked. I didn't want to be the headline, or the hashtag. A few students nodded, phones lifted higher. But I also didn't want to sit in silence while people laughed at my father, at the life that keeps this city running, at the work that built this city. The murmurs grew louder. You can pretend it was a joke. You can say I misunderstood, but I know what I heard, and deep down, you do too. He paused, looked toward the building, toward the windows where teachers still watched. I'm not your charity case. I'm your mirror. And if you're uncomfortable looking at me, maybe it's not me you're afraid of. It's what you see in yourself. That line cracked the air like thunder. Phones flashed. Cameras rolled. By lunchtime, the speech had already gone viral. By sunset, it had been shared by news anchors, activists, and even a few celebrities. One tweet read, Marlon Booker is 15, but just taught a masterclass in dignity. Watch this. But with viral attention came backlash. Parents emailed the school, furious that their children had been exposed to radicalism. One donor withdrew a $100,000 pledge, stating Langston used to be about tradition, not rebellion. A board member went on record, anonymously, telling a local paper, the school can't allow these outbursts to dictate policy. We're being held hostage by guilt. Inside the administrative building, panic began to swell, and someone had to take the fall. 3 days later, Jerome was called into the office of the regional transit company, where he'd worked for over a decade. His supervisor, Mr. Hamley, didn't make eye contact as he slid the termination notice across the desk. We've received concerns from the community about your involvement in certain public demonstrations, Hamley mumbled. Jerome didn't flinch. You mean the school walkout? Hanley swallowed. It's not personal. It's just disruptive. People are talking. Jerome's jaw tensed. So, are we supposed to stop talking because it makes rich people uncomfortable? Hanley sighed. You're a good man, but the board doesn't want noise. Jerome looked at the paper, the bold words termination, community disruption, stamped in red ink. 12 years. Flawless attendance. Gone. When Marlon got the news, he didn't cry. But he didn't speak. He just stared at the floor for a long time. Then finally, he whispered, They're punishing you for what I said. Jerome put a hand on his son's shoulder. No, he said, they're punishing me because I didn't sit down when they told me to. Later that night, the knock came at their apartment door. It was Miss Caldwell, the school's cafeteria manager, and one of the few black staff at Langston. In her hands she held a small box. I thought this might be useful, she said softly. Inside the box was a homemade banner folded stitched by hand. It read, not a bus token, a blueprint. Underneath, in smaller print, Marlon Booker for Youth Council. Jerome is fired from his job, official reason, community disruption. It was a Tuesday morning when Savannah's world unraveled, not with a phone call or a confrontation, but with the flicker of a photo on someone else's screen. She was folding Lucas's tiny socks in the laundry room when her phone buzzed. It didn't stop. 5 missed calls, 12 unread texts, Kemia's name at the top, flashing urgently. Savvy, it's out, check Reddit. Now, confused, Savannah opened the link her niece sent. Her eyes froze on the screen. There, clear as daylight, was the image. Her blouse slightly open. Lucas latched to her chest, both their eyes closed in a moment of peace. A private act, intimate and unguarded, captured without her knowing, posted without her permission. The caption above it screamed in bold white font, Black maid nurses billionaire's baby, savior or seductress. The thread had 12,000 comments and counting. Within hours, it was everywhere. Twitter exploded. Instagram stories reshared it like wildfire. TikTok debates lit up screens across the country. Cable news anchors debated it with smug detachment while YouTubers did deep dives on her background, even mispronouncing her name while digging through her Facebook photos. One side dubbed her a hero. This is black motherhood at its most selfless. Others weren't so kind. She crossed a line. It's predatory. And then the more insidious voices, of course she did this. That's how they get close to power. Savannah's phone rang again and again. She ignored it. When the baby cried upstairs, she dropped everything and ran, grateful for the one task that hadn't turned poisonous. Carter was silent. Completely. No press release. No social media post. Not even a private text. Savannah didn't know if he was in meetings or hiding behind lawyers, but the quiet from his side spoke volumes. The man who once called her irreplaceable had become invisible. That silence didn't just leave her alone. It framed her, left the world to fill in its own story, and it did. Within 2 days, Savannah was flooded. Emails poured in, requests from Oprah's team, local morning shows, national magazines, even foreign publications, but more disturbing were the anonymous ones. "You're disgusting. Looking for a payday. You people always find a way to latch on." That word, latch, cut deeper than she expected, as if she hadn't been the only comfort that child had known for months, as if she had calculated her body's response to the crying baby like some PR move. She turned off her phone, shut the blinds, tried to stay inside, but even the grocery store wasn't safe. A woman near the frozen section whispered just loud enough, "That's her, the maid who breastfed the Winslow baby." A man in a suit passed by and muttered, "Disgrace." And still Lucas cooled in her arms, smiling up at her like she was the only home he knew. When Savannah returned to the estate, the staff barely looked at her. The new security guard didn't even nod. In the kitchen, she overheard Mrs. Caldwell mutter under her breath. She knew what she was doing. Even her safe spaces now felt rigged with landmines. In Lucas's nursery, though, there was peace. He still giggled at her voice, still grabbed at her earrings with tiny fingers, still nuzzled into her collarbone, without judgment. But even there, the camera had been reinstalled. This one newer, smaller, hidden in a corner. That night, Savannah sat on the edge of her bed, in the guest quarters, reading a statement she'd drafted with Kenya's help. It was powerful, honest, dignified, but something inside her resisted releasing it, as if part of her knew. Whatever she said, it would be dissected, mistrusted, warped into something ugly. She was too quiet. She was calculating, too emotional. She was unstable, too firm. She was ungrateful. There was no version of this where she could simply be a woman who acted out of love. Her very body had been politicized. Kenya showed up again 2 nights later, with a bottle of red wine and fire in her eyes. "You want my advice?" she said, pacing the kitchen. "Get ahead of it. Don't hide. You tell your story before they write the ending without you." But Savannah just sat there, holding the baby monitor like a lifeline. "I didn't do anything wrong, Kenya." Her voice was soft, like tissue paper. "Then why do I feel so ashamed?" It wasn't until 3 days later, when she was leaving the estate after putting Lucas down for the night, that the world reminded her how much more it had in store. The evening air was still, unnaturally quiet as she walked toward her car, parked along the tree-lined driveway. The moonlight bounced off the windshield, just enough for her to see it, a note folded in half, tucked beneath the wiper. She hesitated, then reached for it, her fingers trembling before she even touched the paper. 5 words, black marker, all cap. "Stay in your place?" She looked around. No one in sight. Not a sound, not a camera, just that note. That warning, that threat. Only it wasn't just a threat. It was a reminder. A reminder that no matter how close she got to the mansion, the nursery, the boy, the man, it would never truly be her place. Unless she took it. Savannah receives a threatening note on her windshield. "Stay in your place." The announcement arrived on a Monday morning like shocks of cold wind through the halls of Langston Preparatory. It came not with a press conference or a meeting, but via a short, clipped email to faculty and students. "Miss Eloise Gentry will resume teaching duties effective immediately." No mention of the scandal, no acknowledgement of the video, just the polite fiction of normalcy being restored. But Langston wasn't the same anymore. By second period, the atmosphere had shifted. Students arrived at school, dressed in black, uncoordinated, unspoken, but unmistakably united. From freshman to senior, hallway to cafeteria, there was a quiet defiance, humming through the air, like electricity. Marlon Booker walked through the entrance, his hoodie down, his chin up. In his backpack was a carefully wrapped picture frame, not of himself, but of Jerome, standing in front of his city bus, smiling with one foot on the curb and his hands on his hips, a photo Marlon had printed the night before with a single intention. He took his seat in the front row of room 3C before anyone else arrived, unzipped his backpack, and gently placed the framed photo on his desk, right where Miss Gentry would see it. It wasn't a protest sign. It was a truth bomb, a declaration of dignity. When Gentry entered the room, she was composed, but pale. Her blouse was crisp. Her heels clicked louder than they ever had before. Her eyes flicked over the class. She paused when she saw Marlon's desk, the photo. She blinked, faltered, but kept walking. "Good morning," she said, her voice tentative. No one responded. She cleared her throat, opening her lesson plan. "Today we'll continue with our unit on cultural narratives. Please take out your notebooks." Nothing moved. No zippers, no pins, no murmurs, only silence. She glanced up, trying to mask the tremor in her fingers. "I said, please, take out your notebooks." Marlon stared forward, unblinking. Around him, his classmates sat motionless. Some crossed their arms, some stared down, but no one moved. And Miss Gentry took a step back from the podium, visibly rattled now. "If this is about recent events, I understand there may still be strong feelings, but I hope we can focus on learning today." Still nothing. Not defiance. Just absence of cooperation, of respect, of fear. She pushed forward anyway, began reading aloud from the curriculum, her voice cracking at the edges. Her teaching is call and response. And when the room gave her nothing, no heads nodding, no questions, no engagement, her words began to collapse in on themselves. The end of the period, her voice had shrunk to barely audible phrases. When the bell rang, students left silently, passing her like wind. Only Marlon remained, standing slowly, picking up the photo, and giving her a single glance before walking out. He didn't need to speak. He had said everything already. By lunch, the entire school knew. Word spread fast. Miss Gentry had been silenced by silence. In the teacher's lounge, the tension was heavier than ever. Some faculty sympathized with Gentry. Others avoided her completely, but no one dared speak openly. Langston was splitting along invisible lines. That afternoon, Miss Gentry was seen pacing the hallway outside the guidance office, gripping a folder too tightly. Her mouth moved in silent rehearsals, like she was trying to explain something only she believed. The hallway cameras caught the moment she finally broke. She dropped the folder, leaned against the wall, and slid down it, her face crumpling in real time. Tears fell, not the dramatic kind, but the quiet, desperate kind of weeping that happens when a person realizes they've lost something they never understood they had. The guidance counselor, Mrs. Vogel, came rushing out. "Eloise," she whispered, kneeling beside her. "I can't do this," Gentry whispered. "They look at me like I'm a monster." Mrs. Vogel placed a hand on her shoulder. "You have to try. If you want to stay, you have to reach them, talk to them." Gentry wiped her face, trying to recompose herself. But it was already too late. One of the students had recorded it from the other end of the hallway. That evening, the video surfaced on social media again. But this time, it wasn't a scandal, it was a breakdown. A shaky clip titled, "Miss Gentry Loses It at Langston." The comments were divided. She deserves it. She's still a human being. Now, she wants sympathy. Cry me a river. Racist lady. The Langston board, now panicking about the continued media attention, held a private meeting with Gentry and the principal the next day.
"We need a formal reconciliation," Principal Hartley said. "Something public. Something honest."
Gentry, still pale, nodded reluctantly. "I'll address the students," she said, "tomorrow." But Langston was about to face another shock. That night, an investigative journalist named Erin Vasquez from the Manhattan Ledger published a bombshell titled "The Hidden History of Eloise Gentry." The article unveiled documents, archived photos, and interview quotes confirming that Gentry had once been the vice president of a parent-led academic integrity council in another elite district in Connecticut, a group that had openly lobbied for restrictions on admissions diversity efforts and circulated newsletters criticizing the over-accommodation of cultural sensitivities. In short, it was a well-disguised racist parents group. The article included a photo of Gentry from 8 years ago, smiling behind a podium, with the group's logo, a golden torch surrounded by the words "tradition above all." Langston's reputation went from tarnished to radioactive overnight. A reporter uncovers that Gentry once led a racist parents group in another district. The rumors came like smoke, slow at first, then suffocating. Savannah heard them before she saw them. Whispers in the grocery line. Stares outside daycare. Passive-aggressive emails from parents she didn't know. But it wasn't until Kenya slammed a magazine down on her counter that the fire became visible.
Maid or mistress? Billionaire's real mother revealed.
There it was, a tabloid cover, glossy and cruel. A blurred photo of Savannah holding Lucas at a park, cropped next to an older picture of Carter Winslow at a gala. Between them, a doctored image of a baby that looked vaguely like Lucas. Below, in loud red font, intimate bond or hidden bloodline. Savannah's knees nearly gave out. Who would? How did this? She stammered, but Kenya cut her off. They're trying to erase your decency and paint you as someone who schemed her way into a mansion. Savannah sat down, breath short. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through the article. The writer cited anonymous sources, a former staff member, someone close to the family, an insider, all baseless, all suggestive, none true. But in today's world, truth wasn't what mattered. Narrative did. By the end of the day, her inbox had exploded again. This time, the messages were colder, some blunt. Gold digger. You knew what you were doing. Others sharper. He doesn't even look like Carter. She probably planned it from the start. Savannah locked her phone, heart pounding. She hadn't asked for this. She had just been present, just cared. And yet, because of proximity, because of skin and class, and the unspoken rules of racial hierarchy, her nurturing was now being twisted into manipulation. She hadn't crossed boundaries that the world wanted to believe she had. By midweek, things worsened. A YouTube pundit, known for exposing elites, posted a 30-minute video titled, "The Nanny, the Billionaire, and the Baby, What They're Not Telling You." It had over 2 million views in 24 hours. In it, the host dissected Savannah's background, her upbringing in Birmingham, her divorce, even her niece's Instagram posts. None of it had anything to do with Lucas, but it was all twisted into a supposed pattern. She's always been climbing, he claimed, and now she's in the penthouse. Worse, the comment section was a digital lynching. DNA test, now. They always try to secure the bag. How long before she gets the house in her name? Savannah felt naked, not physically, but emotionally, exposed in every room she entered, watched in every moment that should have felt safe. The worst part, Carter still hadn't said a word publicly. No denial, no defense, just silence, until finally he called her into his office. The room was quiet, dimly lit. He gestured for her to sit. "I'm sure you've seen what's being said," he began. Savannah nodded slowly. "They're calling me everything but human." Carter leaned forward, clasping his hands. "We can't control public perception, but we can control what we do next." Her jaw tightened. "You could have spoken up. You could have said something, anything. Your silence speaks louder than those headlines." "I was advised not to," he said flatly. "It complicates legal positioning." Savannah's eyes narrowed. "Legal? Am I a liability now?" Carter exhaled. "No, you're not. But the narrative has shifted. That's not your fault. Still, we need to make decisions." She stayed silent, waiting. "I'd like to formalize your role," he said. "Not just as a nanny, but as Lucas's advisor, his guardian when I travel, a live-in family consultant." It sounded generous, but to Savannah it felt like a cage with velvet walls. "You want me to accept a title that sounds noble but boxes me in," she said. "I want to protect you," Carter said, "and Lucas." But she heard it now, beneath the surface. The same tone that once praised her for being irreplaceable now suggested she was problematic, manageable, if structured correctly. Savannah rose. "Titles don't protect people like me, Carter. They just change the language of ownership." She left the office without another word. That night, she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the baby monitor. Lucas stirred in his crib, murmuring softly. Savannah whispered to herself, "God, give me strength, not to fight them, but to outlast them." The next morning, a news van parked outside the estate gates. Paparazzi drones circled above the backyard. At the farmer's market, people whispered and snapped photos. Lucas, blissfully unaware, clung to her neck in the baby carrier, sucking on his thumb and pressing his face into her scarf. And then, in the middle of a crowded vendor aisle, it happened. He looked up at her, beaming. "Mama," he said, clear, loud, joyful. She froze. The vendor looked up. The woman behind her gasped. "Mama," Lucas repeated, louder this time, clapping his hands. A man nearby caught it on video. Savannah's heart thudded in her chest. She gently cupped Lucas's face. "No, baby, I'm not but it was too late. By the time she got back to the car, the video had already started circulating. Millionaire's baby calls maid mama, caught on camera. Lucas begins calling Savannah, mama, in public, on camera. Jerome Booker sat on the edge of his living room couch, staring at the termination letter that had been folded and unfolded so many times the creases had started to tear. To community disruption, it read, no mention of his years of service, no acknowledgement of his spotless attendance, just one sentence and a signature at the bottom, as if 12 years of loyalty could be erased with the stroke of a pen. He hadn't told Marlon the full truth yet, only that things had gotten complicated, but the truth was clawing at his throat, and each passing day made it harder to breathe, not because of the job, but because of the principle. They didn't fire him because he yelled. He hadn't. They didn't fire him because he cursed. He hadn't. They fired him because he refused to be silent, because his son's name went viral. He made his first call to the transit union that Monday morning. He expected resistance, but he still held on to a sliver of belief that fairness might still exist within systems. The woman who answered didn't even pretend to sound empathetic. Mr. Booker, your case was reviewed internally. Management's decision is final. As for union action, the committee has chosen not to intervene. Jerome blinked. I paid my dues every paycheck. I understand that, sir. You don't, you replied, voice flat. I stood in picket lines in the winter for this union, and now you won't even ask questions. The line crackled with silence. It's not personal. But of course it was. It always was. The next day, he walked into the office of a local activist group called the People's Table. He had seen them once, at a school rally, handing out flyers and microphones. Now he needed a microphone of his own. No. A young organizer named Letitia met with him. Her energy was a mix of fire and focus. They used a vague policy to remove a black man who disrupted the comfort of the privileged, she said, after skimming his termination papers. Textbook retaliation. Jerome exhaled. You think we can win? She leaned back, eyes steady, not in court, but in the streets. Online? Maybe. And sometimes shame is louder than justice. She launched a campaign the next morning. One stand with Jerome. Bus driver. Justice. All fired for fatherhood. Within 2 days, the hashtag had traction. Dozens of former passengers, co-workers, and community members started posting stories about Jerome, the driver who waited for elderly riders, who helped a kid find her lost backpack, who worked holidays when no one else would. But the real breakthrough came when a former colleague named Luis called Letitia's office. I have something, he said. I shouldn't be talking, but Jerome needs to know. In a video call later that night, Luis confessed that Jerome's name had been flagged weeks before his firing. There was a meeting, quiet closed door, he explained. They had a spreadsheet. People considered high exposure risk. Your name was on it. They were looking for any excuse. Jerome's stomach turned. So, it was never about me protesting. Luis shook his head. They were going to fire you no matter what. But they waited till the news cycle shifted. Less noise. And the union. While Luis hesitated, they were warned, told this wasn't a winnable case. The words hit like concrete. Jerome thanked him, hung up, and stared out the window for a long time. In the bedroom down the hall, Marlon sat at his desk, headphones in, staring at a blank document. The speech he had been asked to deliver at a youth leadership summit was due in 3 days, but every time he tried to write, guilt smothered the words. He hadn't told his dad, but he'd overheard everything. The phone call, the letter, the disappointment in his father's breath. Every night, and it was all because of him. If he'd stayed quiet, Jerome would still be working. If he hadn't gone viral, maybe none of this would have happened. Marlon shut the laptop, went to the hallway, stood outside the living room, and finally said it out loud. I'm sorry. Jerome looked up. This is my fault. Jerome stood, walked to him, placed a hand on his shoulder. Don't ever apologize for being seen. You didn't put me in this mess, son. They did. Marlon's eyes glistened. But they used me to punish you. Jerome sighed. And now we show them that being punished doesn't mean being silent. 2 nights later, Jerome received an anonymous email. No subject line. No greeting. Just a sentence. They were monitoring your phone. Attached was a screenshot, an internal memo marked confidential, with his employee ID and a list of flagged text messages, all harmless school reminders, bus schedules. One message to Marlon that read, "Speak up, son, proud of you." Jerome's blood ran cold. They had been listening, not just to silence him, but to watch his every word. He clicked reply, typed one word, who, but there was no response. Only one thing was clear now. This wasn't just about the job. It was about control. About power. And he was gonna find out just how far it went. A whistleblower emails Jerome. They were monitoring your phone. A manila envelope sat on Savannah's bed like a ticking clock. She hadn't opened it yet, but she already knew it wasn't just paperwork. It was a rupture waiting to happen. Carter had handed it to her that morning with his usual coolness, as if transferring a document could somehow balance the emotional chaos swirling around them. Read it when you're ready, he'd said, but know this, I trust you more than anyone else in my life. And then he left. No explanation, no context, just a flash of vulnerability buried beneath his buttoned shirt and boardroom confidence. Savannah finally sat down, opened the envelope, and began reading. The words made her breath catch. In the event of my death, full legal guardianship of Lucas Elijah Winslow shall transfer to Savannah Rose Fields. It was notarized, signed, sealed, complete. She read it twice to be sure. She felt her chest tighten, not with fear, but with something more dangerous. Hope. It was the kind of clause that said, you're not just the help, you're the heart. And yet she also knew the weight of what it meant. That kind of trust didn't come without enemies or consequences. By nightfall, the consequences arrived. Kenya burst into her kitchen, phone in hand, face flushed with disbelief. Girl, what the hell did Carter do? Savannah blinked. You saw it? Kenya held up the screen. It was a leaked document, now viral across multiple media platforms. The will. The headline read, Carter Winslow gives maid custody of his son. Family outraged. The article didn't waste time with nuance. It quoted anonymous family sources, who claimed Savannah had undue influence over Carter and had isolated him during emotional vulnerability. Then came the bombshell, quote from Carter's estranged sister, Lorraine Winslow. It's exploitation. She inserted herself into this family like a parasite. Lucas belongs with blood, not a babysitter. The blow hit harder than Savannah expected. She didn't even know Lorraine, had only seen her twice, both times at distant holiday events. Still, Lorraine's words weren't just cruel, they were coded, steeped in the kind of classist racism Savannah had spent her entire career navigating, but never naming. Carter texted her an hour later, ignore her, I'll handle it. But ignoring wasn't an option anymore. 2 days later, Savannah received a subpoena. Lorraine was suing. She was contesting Carter's decision, citing mental instability and manipulative caregiving. The language was surgical, painted just polite enough to seem legal, but with barbs deep enough to bleed. Carter's legal team filed a response immediately, but the damage was already setting in. Paparazzi appeared outside Savannah's home. News vans parked near her driveway. Anonymous letters filled her mailbox, some supportive, some vile. One note read, he's not your child. Stay in your lane. Another simply said, caretaker, not queen. Inside her home, Savannah tried to maintain calm. She still changed Lucas's diapers, still sang him to sleep, still held him when the noise outside got too loud. But she couldn't stop watching the shadows move behind every curtain. The courtroom was cold, literally and metaphorically. The first hearing was procedural, but even that felt like a stage for performance. Lorraine arrived in a navy pantsuit flanked by 2 lawyers and a personal stylist. She didn't look at Savannah once. Carter sat on the opposite bench, expression unreadable. Savannah tried to stay composed, but the moment the judge asked, Miss Fields, are you prepared to explain your relationship with the child? Her throat tightened. She stood, spoke clearly, gently. I've raised Lucas since the day his mother left. I've held him through every fever, every milestone, every night, terror. I didn't ask for guardianship. It was given out of trust, not ambition. Lorraine's lawyer rose. But you accept it, don't you? This elevation. Savannah met his gaze. I accept the responsibility of love, not elevation. Gasps echoed in the gallery. Even Carter blinked at that. The judge nodded, but gave no sign of where the case was leaning. Court adjourned, and the storm outside raged louder. News anchors dissected her every word. One panel suggested Savannah was a mother figure. Another called her a maid gone too far. The tabloids rebranded her again. This time, the headline read, Billionaire's baby caught in custody war between blood and bond. She didn't leave the house for 2 days. Let Kenya do the groceries. Kept the baby close. But on the 3rd night, something broke. She went to Lucas's crib to check on him. Empty. Rehearse stopped. She spun around, yelling his name. No response. She ran to the hallway, Screamed for Kenya. He's not here. They tore through the house. Every room. Every closet. Panic rising like a flood. Then they reached the front door. It was ajar. Just slightly. Kenya looked at Savannah, voice shaking. Your security code, was it changed? Savannah shook her head. No one touched it. Kenya's phone buzzed. A notification. Her face went pale. She turned the screen to Savannah. A still image from a Ring camera, across the street. A woman in a nanny uniform, pushing a stroller, leaving the house. Time stamped 15 minutes ago. Lucas inside. Savannah's knees buckled. Lucas is kidnapped by an unknown person wearing a nanny uniform. Jerome Booker sat in a small, mindly lit cafe in the Bronx, staring at the blinking cursor on his borrowed laptop. Across from him sat his childhood friend Wallace, a wiry IT tech, who had once hacked his high school's grading system to protest a discriminatory dress code. Now Wallace cracked his knuckles and leaned over the keyboard like a man about to cut through armor. You sure about this? He asked. Once I get in, there's no walking it back. Jerome didn't flinch. They came after my job, my name, and my kid's peace. I want the truth. All of it. Wallace nodded, hands moving fast. He bypassed Langston's firewall, using a patch he'd written himself. Quiet, undetectable, untraceable. Within minutes, they were inside the staff archive folder, buried beneath layers of encrypted drives. The files stretched back years, thousands of documents, emails, meeting memos. Wallace filtered them with surgical precision. Diversity, discipline, admissions, and finally, Booker. The keyword exploded in red flags. What they uncovered wasn't just negligence, it was philosophy. Staff emails, written in hushed coded racism, phrases like certain communities lack readiness, and low-income behavioral gaps. Notes about how students from non-traditional families should be screened more rigorously. There were group chats joking about Marlon's viral moment. One teacher even typed, "He should thank us for the exposure." Jerome's fists clenched. One email stood out. A thread between Miss Eloise Gentry and Langston's principal subject line, concerns about Booker. In it Gentry wrote, "I've tried to be compassionate, but it's exhausting. When students like him treat every critique as persecution, I fear we're coddling them into false expectations."
Jerome read the line 3 times.
Coddling them. It wasn't just prejudice, it was disdain. He was about to screenshot and send it to Letitia, when Wallace clicked open another file. "Hold up," Wallace said. "This doesn't match the rest." It was an older email from a personal Langston staff account. The subject was simple. There it passed. Inside was a letter Miss Gentry had written, but never sent. It was a draft, dated 6 years ago. In it, she wrote, "There was a time when I believed in equality more than policy. I married Marcus Monroe in 1995. He was black. We met in grad school. My parents disowned me. His family didn't trust me. We lasted 3 years before it collapsed under weight. Neither of us saw coming." Jerome froze. The woman who had mocked his son, who had belittled working black parents, who had become a symbol of elite condescension, had once been in love with a black man. Wallace looked up. That doesn't make sense. But it did, in the most uncomfortable way. The anger wasn't just learned, it was left over, sour, entangled in regret. Later that night, Jerome showed the email to Marlon. He watched his son read the screen, slowly, carefully. When Marlon reached the part about the failed marriage, he didn't say anything for a long time. Then barely audible, "She used to love someone who looked like me." Jerome nodded. Marlon's eyes narrowed. "So what changed?" Jerome exhaled. Maybe she never forgave him, or herself. Marlon handed back the laptop. "We still expose her. We have to, but we also show the whole truth, all of it." Jerome was quiet, proud, torn. They didn't want to destroy her. They wanted to force a reckoning. The next day, before they could act, Langston's halls erupted in chaos. Marlon had just finished a club meeting when a student sprinted into the main corridor shouting, "Call the nurse. Miss Gentry just collapsed." Marlon dropped his backpack and ran toward the crowd, gathering outside. Room 3C. Miss Gentry lay crumpled near the doorway, her eyes unfocused, lips slightly parted. The principal knelt beside her, calling for paramedics. Someone whispered, "She looked pale all morning." Someone else said, "She hasn't been the same since the article." Later that night, the school sent out a bulletin. Miss Eloise Gentry has been hospitalized and diagnosed with advanced stage pancreatic cancer. Prognosis, terminal. The news hit like thunder. Suddenly, everything shifted. Marlon sat in his room, staring at the email again, reading her unsent words, and feeling something unfamiliar. Not forgiveness. It's something adjacent. Complication. Because, behind all the cruelty, all the microaggressions, all the cold professionalism, there had been a story no one knew, a grief maybe she never unpacked, a shame she weaponized. Jerome placed a hand on Marlon's shoulder. "Still want to release it?" he asked. Marlon looked up, eyes sharper now.
Yes, but not to punish her.
He turned the screen toward his father. "To teach them what silence breeds." Miss Gentry collapses in the hallway, diagnosed with terminal illness. Savannah stood at the edge of the Winslow estate garden, her fingers brushing against the fading petals of a rosebush she had never tended but often admired. The air around her was thick, not with summer heat, but with questions. Lucas had been missing for 3 hours before police recovered him just a few blocks away, abandoned in his stroller outside a shuttered convenience store. Whoever had taken him vanished without a trace, leaving behind only trauma and unanswered questions. The man in uniform, purchased online, no fingerprints, no motive, but Savannah knew this wasn't random, it was a message. When Carter arrived at the station to pick up Lucas, Savannah had expected fury or panic, but instead, he was quiet, too quiet. On the ride home, he said just 6 words. "We need to talk. Tonight." Now the sun dipped behind the tall hedges, and Savannah heard Carter's footsteps approaching across the gravel path. "I'm sorry," he said, before anything else. "This should have never happened." Savannah didn't look at him. "They used a uniform, my uniform." "I know," he said, "and I won't pretend I can fix that. But I owe you more than protection. I owe you the truth." She turned toward him slowly, bracing herself. "What truth?" He swallowed hard. "Lucas isn't my biological son." The words landed like thunder, but Savannah didn't flinch. Somewhere deep inside, a part of her had suspected. The nose, the curl of his hair, the way his eyes shimmered like someone she once knew. Carter continued. "The woman I said was his mother, Annabelle. She never carried him. That story was manufactured for privacy. Lucas was born to a woman named Naomi. Biracial, and beautiful, quiet, brilliant. She was my brother's girlfriend, secret girlfriend. She died in childbirth." Savannah's knees softened. "Your brother?" "David," Carter said, voice distant. "The one no one talks about anymore. He OD'd a few months before Lucas was born. Never acknowledged Naomi, never acknowledged the baby." Savannah blinked. The name Naomi pulled at a memory, faint but rooted. A woman from a free clinic. She volunteered at part-time, fragile, alone, 5 months pregnant, never gave a last name. "I knew her," Savannah whispered. "She came into the clinic, scared. She wouldn't talk to anyone, but she let me help her with paperwork. She had no family. She was in pain, and she said," Savannah's voice cracked, "she said the father didn't want anyone to know." Carter nodded slowly. "She didn't tell me about the pregnancy until 2 weeks before she went into labor. By then, David was gone. She begged me not to put Lucas into foster care. I didn't want the responsibility. I didn't know how. And then, you walked into that nursery and he stopped crying. You saved us both." Savannah sat down on the stone bench behind her, breathless. "So why lie? Why build this story?" "Because my family would never have accepted him, not fully, and Naomi deserved better than their pity." Carter knelt in front of her. "You stepped into this role with grace, but I forced you into silence. I never asked what you needed. I just let you carry it." Savannah met his gaze. "I didn't carry it. I chose it, but you buried too much, Carter." "I couldn't love him until you did," Carter said, his voice breaking. "I couldn't see him as mine, not because of race, not consciously, but because of what he represented. My brother's mistake, my shame." Savannah looked away. "He's not your shame. He's a child. He's a future." A moment passed, and then another, until Carter reached into his jacket and pulled out a new legal document. "I'm making it official," he said. "You'll be named co-guardian. Not just if something happens to me. Now, permanently, if you'll accept." Savannah's hand trembled as she took the envelope. Inside was a draft agreement. Custodial authority, medical rights, financial access. It wasn't a handout. It was recognition. "I want to," she whispered, "but the world doesn't." Carter stood. "Then we'll show the world something different." But the world was already preparing its next move. The next morning, Savannah found a thick envelope stuffed into a mailbox. No return address, no postage, just her name typed clinical. Inside was a cease and desist letter from Lorraine Winslow's legal team. It was venom in legal language. It accused Savannah of exerting psychological influence over a minor and sabotaging familial inheritance protocols. It threatened to file an emergency injunction to remove her from the estate, strip her of guardianship, and pursue legal damages for emotional endangerment. But one line stood out above all.
If you do not withdraw from Lucas Winslow's life voluntarily within 7 business days, we will file a motion to assume full custody, immediately and without further notice.
Savannah sat down on her front steps, hands shaking. 7 days. To walk away from the only child who had ever called her mama. To surrender the one bond that wasn't born in blood, but built in trust. She looked down the driveway, where Lucas had once run toward her, arms wide, laughter full, and she knew the real custody battle wasn't over. Paperwork. It was over. Who got to define motherhood? Savannah receives a legal threat. If she doesn't walk away, she'll lose custody forever. Langston Preparatory School stood taller than Marlon remembered. Not physically, but symbolically. Years had passed since he'd walked its halls in silence, dodging whispers, and enjoying laughter carved from class and color. But today, as the black Mercedes rolled to a stop at the main entrance, the laughter had long faded, and Marlon Booker's name now echoed through the same corridors with a different weight. He stepped out of the car in a navy blue tailored suit, crisp white shirt, no tie, clean, commanding. The kind of presence that didn't ask for respect. It was already owed. Jerome stepped out from the driver's side, his graying beard full, his shoulders straight. He no longer wore a transit uniform, just a well-cut coat and the same proud look he wore when he drove buses through the Bronx.
Ready?
Jerome asked, adjusting his cuff. Marlon nodded. Let's show them what legacy looks like. They walked through the gleaming doors together. Inside, students passed in blurs of navy and white. Teachers nodded, some offering rehearsed smiles. Others paused, confused, trying to place the face that once sat quietly in the third row. But they all knew the name now. Marlon Booker, the youngest civil rights attorney to win a discrimination case against a private institution in the state. The same institution that now welcomed him as their youngest board member. He'd earned it, every inch. After graduating valedictorian, Marlon had received a full scholarship to a top university. Law school followed, then the cases, the headlines, the speaking engagements. But beneath all the accolades was something stronger, a mission forged in humiliation, resistance, and a love for justice taught to him by the same man once mocked by the very people now praising his brilliance. At the boardroom entrance, the school's new headmaster, a progressive black woman named Dr. Mia Voss, greeted him with a firm handshake. "Welcome home, Mr. Booker," she said. Merlin smiled. "I never thought I'd hear those words in this building." Dr. Voss nodded. "Let's make sure the next generation never has to earn their belonging twice." Inside, the board sat in silent anticipation. Older men and women, some of whom had once been part of the same machine that failed him. They smiled, now, offered water, mentioned how impressed they were with his accomplishments. But Marlon didn't come for praise. He came to rewrite the script. After the meeting, he walked the halls alone, slowly, retracing the steps of his teenage self. Room 3C looked smaller than he remembered. He peeked inside. New furniture, new teacher. But the ghost of that classroom moment still lingered. Gone was Miss Gentry's name from the faculty wall. Her legacy, her awards, her presence, scrubbed clean. After her diagnosis, she quietly resigned. Months later, she passed away in hospice, leaving behind no children, no eulogies, just a folder of handwritten apologies found in her desk. One of them was addressed to Marlon. He never opened it. He kept it, but some wounds aren't closed by words alone. Across town, another home was shifting. Savannah Fields stood on the porch of the Winslow estate, no longer a guest, no longer a nanny. The ink on the adoption papers had dried. Lucas, now a wide-eyed 6-year-old with a sharp tongue and wild curls, called her mama, with confidence, not confusion. The legal battles had been vicious. Lorraine's team pushed until their filings collapsed under their own contradictions. Carter, quiet and subdued, signed over full parental rights before disappearing into a quieter life overseas. And on her 60th birthday, he sent Savannah one final gesture, the deed to the house. No note, no ribbon, just a key with her name on it. Kenya cried when she read the letter. Savannah didn't. She just sat down in the living room, where Lucas now drew superheroes on the marble floor, and whispered, "This house finally has a heartbeat." Weeks later, Savannah and Lucas visited Langston for a youth reading program. Marlon happened to be there that same day. reviewing architectural plans for the school's new equity wing. His initiative funded by anonymous donors and designed to celebrate marginalized voices. When he saw Savannah across the courtyard holding Lucas's hand, he smiled. "Miss Fields," he said. She turned. Her eyes lit up. "Mr. Booker, or should I say board member Booker?" Lucas stared at him, then looked up at Savannah. "Mama, who's that?" Savannah knelt beside him. "Someone who used to be a little boy, just like you, but now he's changing the world." Lucas stepped closer. "You look like me," he said. Marlon crouched down. "Heartwarming. Maybe we have something in common." Savannah watched the two of them, the quiet recognition, the shared eyes, the unspoken bond, and her breath caught. Later that night, she pulled out an old photo she hadn't looked at in years. Naomi, pregnant, laughing. Beside her, a blurry man with tight curls and the same chin as Marlon. Marcus Monroe, Marlon's uncle. Naomi's best friend in grad school. Her brief boyfriend, before David, before everything. Savannah whispered aloud, "Lord, what have you done?" In that moment, it all made sense. Lucas wasn't just the child she raised. He was Marlon's half-brother. Born from different parents, bonded by bloodlines twisted in time, injustice, and redemption. Savannah didn't tell them. Not yet. Some truths unfold when hearts are ready. But she smiled, knowing the next chapter wouldn't start in silence. It would begin in unity. They tried to silence him, erase the truth, and move on like nothing happened. But now you know what they did. If his story shook something in you, don't just scroll. Type yes if you believe his life matters. Subscribe if this broke your heart.